Now broadcasting from the Next Gen Conservative Studio in sunny South Florida, bringing you the latest in politics, current events, and pop culture. This is the Whitfield Report with Sam Whitfield.
Alrighty, everyone, and welcome to Monday's edition of the Whitfield Report. I'm your host, Sam Whitfield, and joining us is our first guest of the year officially. Came highly recommended to me by a couple friends in the thriller author community. Mr. Steve Stratton, who I would dare say might be the most badass guest that I've had on the show, just based off of his resume. Steve, from what I've seen, he started as a Green Beret, and then went into the Secret Service and did a few other things, and now he's becoming a thriller author. So, pretty extensive resume. So Steve, welcome to the show, and glad to have you here. You don't look 70 at all. You look more like, I would say, 50 or so. But yeah. So I don't really even know where to start. How did you I mean, let's just start from the beginning. How did you what made you decide to enlist, first of all, and thank you for your service as well, and just what's your background? So. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh, wow. So you go back to the Nixon White House then?
I was there in August, like a week before. And my sponsor, as we were driving into DC, my funny story is that he said, "Do you know what that is?" And I said, "Is that the Watergate?" And he said, "Yeah, don't go there." So
Yeah.
it was a very temptuous, not temptuous, but a good word. It was a very crazy time in DC.
Sure,
But
sure.
Ford took over and was trying to promote stability and get the country moving forward again. And so I went with right away. I'm going with on the advanced trips out to Vail, Colorado, learning how to ski because I've got to follow the president around with a radio on my back is like the backup to the backup kind of idea. And I'm just hoping I don't run over him because I literally learned how to ski one day and then started following the president. It was pretty great.
Yeah, how does that work? Like, I've always been curious too. Like in the Secret Service, like does the president like I know that you guys have to follow the president around pretty closely, but like how much privacy does he actually get if any? Because I can imagine that the folks on Clinton's detail saw some pretty interesting things to say the least.
Well, in and around the White House, um, they're not in the living quarters. You're not in the living quarters unless you have to be,
hmm
um, right? And you're not inside the Oval Office as talks are going on, right? You've got uniformed division, Secret Service officers, right? They dress more like DC police, and they're stationed around the White House. And then the agents, of course, are right outside the protective detail leader and the team in case the president decides he wants to move, make a movement, go somewhere. But if he's, walking back and forth in the White House, he's got some freedom. When he was President Ford was skiing, he was doing blue runs, thank goodness, and the Secret Service team was out away from him, such that the photographers could take pictures and it looked like the president was on the mountain. He wasn't crowded, you know,
Yeah,
by a team. Of course, when he steps out of the limo to shake hands, then they're in tight, right?
yeah,
Looking for the threat. So my job was as a technical security specialist. After I did the communications for 4.5 years, I switched over to the Secret Service. And my job was to go out in advance again and make sure there weren't any bombs in the elevators, make sure the rooms were sweet if he was staying overnight, and just essentially doing technical protection of the space so that the agents and the protective detail could come in and feel that the space was secure, right? We
right.
bomb dogs, bomb teams, things like that. So
How long? I've always wondered, like, how long does it take for the advanced team to, like, I guess I don't know if this is the word, but I guess sweep an area. Um, do you just have
well,
to
it
show up like
depends
an
on its
hour or
size,
so?
Yeah, it depends on its size. When the Pope came, when the Polish Pope came to D.C., he's doing a big long motorcade, right? And back in those days, we didn't have those concrete barriers, so we actually were taking all day long to fill barrels with water, inspect them, tape them up with tamper tape, to create a barricade for the motorcade route. Uh, so those kind of things, and making sure that the man covers are welded down, different things like that. Those can take days, and
Yeah,
usually in a presidential advance or a big advance like the Pope coming to the U.S., things like that. You're spending a couple weeks getting things done, 2 to 3 weeks in advance doing that.
Y- yeah, that's all pretty fascinating. Yeah, my grandmother, she was a school secretary back in the 80s, and Reagan actually visited her the school where she was like an administrative assistant, and she said, uh, the Secret Service advanced detail was one of the most impressive things that she had seen. How they were scouring, every inch, and that was shortly after the assassination attempt on Reagan too. So they were being very thorough in regards to that whole deal.
Yeah, it's interesting. So when Ford would go to Vail, the lead agent that would ski with him, Larry Boondorf, he actually became like the security chief for the Olympic Committee, the Winter Olympic Committee in the U.S. and things like that. But it's such a good skier; he can ski backwards 10 times better than I can ski forward. He
Yeah.
was actually the one in Sacramento that grabbed the pistol from Squeaky Chrome and made sure that the pistol didn't go off, that 45 she had. So uh, he was a real quality guy, very dedicated, and high level
Wow.
security expert.
So you were in the Secret Service during the Ford administration, and then did you stay in, or what was your career path afterwards?
Yeah, so a couple years in the Secret Service and a campaign year where I was traveling about 300 plus days a year. Excuse me. I decided to take a break and go skydiving down in Florida. I liked it so much, I sent in my resignation and went looking for a job after a couple of months, looking for a job down in Florida, and found one with Department of Energy doing security down there in Florida. So I spent a couple of years there. It was very informative. Got to, between the 4.5 years with being an Army communicator, then a technical security specialist, 6.5 years, I had at least a couple hundred days a year, every year that I was on the road, going somewhere, doing something, and a lot of overseas travel, and it was time to take a break. And so that's when I got out of the government system, went to work as contractor. And while I was doing that, I decided to join the National Guard. And I went via the Florida National Guard. I went through the Special Forces selection process with the Guard. So in the National Guard, there is the 19th and the 20th Special Forces that are Utah, Colorado, California, sort of the western states is the 19th, and the 20th is on the East Coast, essentially. So I was able to get my select and get my Green Beret, get my long tab, as they call it, via the National Guard.
Wow. So and what was that like, being a Green Beret?
Oh, tons of fun. Of course, you've got in the state of Maryland, where I was at the time, our adjutant general for the Army side of the National Guard was former Special Forces. So we had a budget like nobody else in the Maryland National Guard. He let us use his airplane, his helicopter, his Black Hawk. I had a free fall team, and we had a lot of great training and a lot of fun building the team and getting it ready for what became the GWAT later.
Yeah. So and correct me if I'm wrong, but the Green Berets, they do more like I mean, I know that the SEALs are mainly like a water based special forces team, but the Green Berets, if I'm not mistaken, they do more like urban, like terrain type missions.
Well, the number one focus of Special Forces is to train partner nations. So we have on a Special Forces what's called an Operational Detachment A. We have an officer, a senior lieutenant or a captain, a warrant officer, a master sergeant, and then we have one sergeant that is on intel, and then we have 2 weapons sergeants, 2 communication sergeants, 2 demolition sergeants, and we certainly can go off and do missions, raids, rescue hostages, counterterrorism. But what I did pre-GWAT, because I retired in 2000, was go on training missions, like go down to Colombia and go to their ranger school and do training for mobile units and things like that. We're entering the counter drug fight in Colombia. So
yeah. Well, I was reading a bit on your website, and I suppose this would be a good way to kind of transition. At what point did you decide that you wanted to become a writer? Because I noticed that just based off of the blurbs I've read, your books, the Shadow Tier series, tend to focus a lot on the drug war. So I'm curious, did your experiences mold your decision to write about that fictionally, or I guess what was your path towards becoming a writer then?
yeah, so the inciting event for the first book took place in 1993. My parents were on vacation down in Puerto Penasco at the top of Baja, and they were heading back to Southern California when drug runners crashed into the truck and killed my mother. And
Oh,
yeah, they threw, of course, the federales just threw my dad in jail. I think one of the drug runners lived, threw him in jail, and then figured they'd sort it out later. But my mom died in a Mexican hospital. And so from 93 to 2000, I had done all kinds of things. I'd done storyboards like you see in Hollywood, when they're prepping a movie. I did PowerPoints, all kinds of things, but right.
Yeah.
And my writing in my contracting career had been proposals to the government, technical documents, things like that. I'd never written anything, that would be considered literary or a thriller, that kind of thing. And finally, 2019, my wife said, "Why don't you just write the story?" Because I wanted to use the writing of the story to help me with recovering from the event.
Sure.
And,
Yeah.
So I started writing, and it was just at the behest of my wife. It's like, come on, just get the story out. And then as we talked, I live outside in a suburb of Denver here. I found Jerry Jenkins, who had done 23 times bestseller author, who had written the Left Behind series, Christian series. And I found him and did a mentorship with him. He's down in like Colorado Springs there. Like an hour away, right? So that started me on my journey. It's just like anything. When I decide I'm interested in something, whether it's parachutes, motorcycles, guns, whatever it might be, fishing, I go all in. I'm sort of, a little bit nuts like that. I'm reading everything, looking at everything, deciding what I want to do and stuff. And that's how I started. And one of the first things I heard was Jeff Wilson said, of Andrews and Wilson said, not only do you need to hone your craft, you need to get in the community, become part of the community. And being in the military and other, like the Secret Service, you have a tribe, right? You have your people, and create community. And so that's one of the things I went looking for was community. And that's how I came across, of course, Jeff. I connected with Jeff and Brian, and then got to meet all these other great people, even like through virtual thriller fests and things like that during COVID. And so once I got into it, it became, I'll honestly say, it became a bit of an obsession to just further myself, become better, learn more, soak it up.
Yeah. No, it's funny that you mentioned Andrews and Wilson because I just like about a month ago started listening to the audiobook version of the Tier 1 series that they did, which I guess, they've finished that series and gone on since then, but I I tagged them on Twitter, or I guess it's called X now, whatever they're calling it, and mentioned that I finished the first book and liked it, and I think one of them followed me back, and I'm like, wow, so they're really great guys, and yeah, I mean, I think I met Eric probably like 6 or 7 years ago, Eric Bishop, through one of the thriller communities in Facebook for Jack Carr. That's how we first met, and I had been kind of writing a few short story manuscripts of my own, and he and a few other people pushed me to actually flesh out and write it, and so that's what I did. I published the first book back in July. So pretty interesting how Facebook and kind of the internet has allowed us all to connect.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Jack responded to my questions a couple of times. Yeah, he said Jeff and Brian are just real people. They just have to be real good authors. But
Yeah,
they're all about helping folks, and that's what I like about this community. There's nobody's worried, that I'm going to sneak up and take some percentage of their business.
no,
So many people read so many books, right? And that's a great thing about writing is I
yeah,
get to live out these stories in my head, create character, scene, and share them, and get feedback on my writing.
Yeah, it's definitely been it's kind of a new avenue for me because I've been doing podcasting for, at this point, several years. I'm turning 29 on Wednesday, but I started podcasting when I was like 14, and I've always been into politics, but I have to admit, since the 2020 election, I kind of got burned out on just doing politics all the time because it is a shit show, especially with the current administration at the helm. So, I like I said, I'd been writing for a bit, and I was like, well, why don't I focus a little more on that? I wouldn't say I've mastered podcasting because you never truly master something, but I wanted something new, so I decided to kind of dive back into writing, which I hadn't done in a while. And yeah, it's been a pretty interesting journey for the last year and a half. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I was lucky enough to get a traditional deal with a publisher, very small press, of course, but
yeah,
as we mentioned, same one as Eric and a couple other folks, and got an advance, all kinds of good stuff like that. And it's funny, Shadow Tier, my first book, gave him the manuscript, and the publisher was very honest and said, "Hey, it's going to be quite a while before I can get this published. I'm backed up." I said, "No problem, I'll keep writing." And just not too long ago, I went back and looked at one of those manuscripts and went through it again. I guess the delta between 2019 and now, of just what I've learned and what I should be
yeah,
doing when I'm writing is pretty amazing. And so now that my publisher's gone out of business, as we talked before we went live, I am looking at vellum. I'm looking at how to, number one, take my first two books, which I have the rights for, certainly go through the first one, do an edit, clean it up, and then put it back out, much like Eric just has, like the ebook or the body
yeah,
man, that kind of thing. So I'm a couple months behind Eric, but getting my ISDN, all the different things.
yeah. That's always fun. Yeah, and on the day we're recording this, Eric just released or I guess re-released the Body Man, his first book, which is funny because uh, when he came on the show 2 years ago, for the first time, he had just signed with his old publisher, and we had been talking about how he really loved his new publisher and how they were great. And then last time I talked to him was when he was self-publishing Ransom Daughter, which I have right here on my desk. And he said that they had gone out of business and he was self-publishing. So pretty interesting how
Yeah,
that.
I'm in between. I'm playing around with all the self-publishing stuff. Been talking to a few people that showed some level of interest about taking over the Shadow Tier series. I've since my second book came out in August, Shadow Sanction, I've completed an origin story novella for my protagonist, Lance Bearwood, and that's with an editor. I completed a third book in the series, and then I have a fourth book that is also done that I'll put through one more edit. So there's a possibility, if I was to self-publish, there's a possibility of a novella and 4 Shadow Tier books coming out this year. So
Yeah. Wow.
yeah, I think that'll keep me busy.
Yeah, so all my books are actually novellas. I've only published the first one here, Shadows of Deception.
Oh, nice.
And
there you go.
And then I'm writing the second one now. I have like outlines for at least like 5 or 6 more books. I wrote the outlines when I was in college, but as a writing major, ironically in college, I never really had time to write for myself. I was writing all these academic papers. So I graduated 2 years ago and finally got back to, writing for myself and published my first novella back in July. And I'm working on, my second right now, which I'm hoping will be out in February. But, it's been an interesting process. I think the one thing I never expected was, I originally thought that, the novella would sell better on Amazon Kindle. But as it turns out, most of my orders have been for paperback versions, and I find that pretty interesting how even novellas now are getting kind of a comeback in terms of like actual physical media.
I was really
So
surprised with that stat that I read the other day that said exactly the same thing, that paperbacks were starting to outsell after that huge press of ebooks, Kindle. Then
yeah,
now paperbacks are making a comeback, and I'm not sure if it's the ability to read, put it down, carry it with you, and not have a device. I like paperbacks, because when I go out into the woods, if my truck breaks down, I start a fire with a paperback. But
yeah. Well, I like the Kindle personally. Like I've one of the paper whites, and it's nice to be able to just read and have that and adjust the font size. So I mean, as far as that goes, I definitely understand the appeal, but I am glad to see that like physical print media is kind of making a comeback, because for a while there it seemed like Kindles were just going to take over the it's not so much the Kindles themselves that bug me, it's when you have reader apps on your phone. I can't really stand those because your phone is just a big distraction, and it's kind of hard to read on those from what I've
yeah,
experienced.
my wife will occasionally have a paperback, hardback, but she reads ebooks, but actually she's an audio, leans
Yeah.
very heavily to audio, and actually, my second book, Shadow Sanction, David Temple from the Thriller Zone, I've got him. He's starting work on the audio version of that, and so I like
Oh,
audio
very
too.
nice.
Yeah, yeah, I like audio too, and that is a growing space. So
Yeah. It's I mean, like I said, I've been in the podcast sphere for a long time, and it's interesting because it's only been within the last like 2 years that audiobooks have kind of, I guess, not really merged, but they've grown in popularity in tandem with that space too. So and as far as me, all I did was I went onto Audible's audiobook platform and hired a guy, but it was still a pretty good experience.
yeah,
So,
cool, cool.
um, well, as far as the Barrellands thrills go, like you said, that's mainly focused on the drug war aspects. So,
Yeah, and
um,
that came directly from my military experience down in South America. That and that incident where my
yeah,
mom was killed, and so part of that, part of writing a revenge book is me deciding it's smarter to write about invading Mexico than actually doing it, especially at my age. Um, but I do think I could collect a few people to go with me, but it would probably
yeah,
wouldn't end as well as it does for land. So that was the start, and then it's maybe it's not the most interesting topic right now, but there's certainly a lot to write about, because the second book, we go from chasing El Chapo and the Sinaloa cartel to they're still involved, but now it's 2003. The first book's in '98, which was fun trying to remember, all the gear we had and didn't have in
right,
1998. But in the second book, it's 2003, and now we've got the president telling my protagonist, Lance Fairwood, you need to stop the Taliban and their opium trade, right? They're making $400 million a year, which
Mm-hmm.
is a rip from the headlines, an old headline, 20-year-old headline, 21 years now. But that was the case, and the military was in Afghanistan saying that we're not here for drugs, we're here for counterterrorism, right? And we're not after the Taliban for their drugs, but just for being the Taliban and ISIS and AQ and other people like that. So it became really easy to incorporate Afghanistan, and then somewhere out of the blue, Marseille came up, right? Marseille was the center of attraction with the French Connection, and of course, it's a great movie about that.
Oh, right,
That was another real life event. The mafia called Union Corsa, right? They tried to get an army sergeant to bring a couple hundred kilos back to the States.
Yeah.
When he PCS, they tried to break into New York and connect with the mafia in New York, things like that. So I was able to tie that together with the idea of a government contractor who was doing flights of material and people, contractor flights of material and people and carrying other things.
So, if I may shift topics a little bit, not too much, but do you think the drug war is still important, or I guess like why isn't the drug war talked about as much now? I guess is another question, because it seems like I saw one of your posts on Instagram about China with the fentanyl thing, which is something that I've covered on this show as well, a little bit, but it doesn't seem like the media is too interested in really covering the drug war anymore.
No, occasionally they'll show
Yeah.
something brought into port, some big pile of drugs that the Coast Guard and the Navy have collected out of the Caribbean, things like that. But it becomes so mainstream. It was almost like how, during the GWAT, the coverage just sort of panned out, right? Okay, we've invaded, we've done this, and then it's sort of like the everyday work goes on, and it's not really that interesting or that sensational, right?
Yeah.
But then fentanyl shows up, and it's poison, right? And a previous administration pushed the Chinese to to stop it and slow it down, that kind of thing, and it dipped for a minute. It dipped for a minute, right?
Yeah.
And then it came right back up. And just recently here in Colorado, actually last year in Colorado, there was a case where like this whole extended family was into the selling of fentanyl and things like that, and they would all pile into the minivan, go down to Puerto Penasco, same place my parents were, drop their minivan off, go to the beach for a couple days. The van would show back up. They'd drive back to Colorado. The van would disappear for a day or two, come back, and they'd get a big wad of cash. And so the cartels were filling the minivan with fentanyl, like in the dash and other places like that. And so,
Oh, wow.
yeah, so that becomes a little bit more sensational. But even 100,000 people a year killed by fentanyl, I think, just doesn't rise to the level of the news media, other than it's somebody makes some move and
Right.
does something in Congress, because 100,000 across 360 million people in the U.S. It's not a significant. I hate to put it that way, but it's not a significant number enough to draw the attention. And Biden, that as you said, that blog I did was about Biden meeting with Xi, and he says, yeah, yeah, sorry about the fact that I weaponized fentanyl against you, but yeah, sure, I'll shut it off, right? Yeah, and it's labeled a pandemic, right? A couple of years ago in West Virginia, and then we don't hear anything more about it, right? Because the the lawsuits against the big makers of oxycodone and stuff like that were going on. So fentanyl disappears. Oxy's the news for a minute, and then it disappears. And so, that's another blog I've done. It's about the we've always just attacked the supply side. We tried, right, even in the 80s with DARE in high schools and junior highs and things like that, Dare to be clean and whatever those things were. We tried working on the demand side, but, I think there was some, if you look back in the records, you can see that they had some positive effect, but once again, they didn't have long-term lasting positive effect.
Yeah, well, and I think some of the languaging. I mean, certainly when I was in school, I mean, at that point, I hate to say it, but Dare was kind of a joke, and it actually, in a weird type of way, actually, I think, kind of tempted kids and especially teenagers to kind of do the opposite. And
Don't touch that whiskey in the liquor cabinet.
right. But yeah, but then they would also say stuff like, well, if you smoke pot, they would basically describe as LSD, and clearly that the two aren't the same. With that being said, I don't know, because it's been probably 10 plus years since I've lived in Denver, so weed wasn't legalized when I moved to Florida. They had passed it, but it hadn't gone into effect. And as far as I can tell, weed legalization hasn't really done any favors for Colorado. It's kind of made things worse, just from what I've seen. But you live there now, and I don't. So
No, I'd have to agree with you. It's another revenue stream. Funny story, when they legalized pot, right after that, I sat on an airplane next to the Denver city controller, and I asked him, how are these shops, paying their taxes? And he said, they're paying it in cash, and my people are getting high counting it. Right? So
yeah,
all the stuff on the money, and he was actually going to create a contact there, actually launder the money. But the city, all the cities and stuff had gone to credit cards and electronic payments, and now here come all these pot shops with all this gummed up cash
right,
giving it to the city. So, but I don't know that the ratio between the shops and the need for extra policing, because not so much people are a menace per se. They, like, they're not getting amped up and becoming a menace. They're a menace because they're on the street. They go to other drugs. They drive their car stoned, and there's more accidents, things like that. So the funny thing is that the cartels are still involved, because they're now, because of the price point pressure, they're now selling their
right,
weed that they've grown illegally cheaper, right? And so people are still drawn to cartel drugs, even when there's legalization, at least with marijuana.
yeah,
So it's interesting, because here in the state, there was a lot of buildings and a lot of setups. Like, I know one down in Salida, it looked like a military campus. It had, concertina wire, razor wire at the top of the fence, and lights and everything. And what it was you could tell it was a grow house, because they had big transformers outside for the lights, right?
yeah,
And a lot of those have closed, merged. I know people that, luckily, they didn't put their life life savings into pot or something like that, but they put some money in, and all those stocks, bubbled up for a minute and then collapsed,
yeah.
because it just didn't prove to be that big of a market.
Well, the other thing I've read, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I read a few years ago that all that, one of the things that the weed legalization was premised on, from what I remember, was, it's going to be a revenue source so that we can fund public education, and then
People smoke weed, so we can tell them not to smoke weed.
That went, the public schools got funded for a minute, but then the weed money went back right into the went right back into the industry, so, and I was like, I told you that was going to happen. You thought I was paranoid, but
Well, it's like, like it's like the states who I remember when Florida went through we're going to start doing the lottery and things like that. And,
yeah,
oh, the schools are going to get so much money and stuff like that. And the schools are still looking around in Florida to this day going, where did it all go,
yeah,
And it just gets sucked up somehow into the state budget and used for other things. So, yeah,
yeah,
but, Broadway, down on Broadway in Denver still has a particular odor to it, when you're driving up Broadway and stuff
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
But other than that, there's shops here and there, and there's one not too far from me, um, and there's even one from where my daughter-in-law and grandson live. There's just one at the corner, and they've got all kinds of, they're trying to be funny names and stuff like that. But the real problem is the traffic right around them. My
yeah,
daughter-in-law and grandson can't walk to the grocery store anymore because they've almost been run over a couple of times by people zooming into the pod shop and then pulling out, and just being generally crazy.
yeah,
And anyway, so it's I have a friend who was a CIO for a company that grew pot and doing the IT work. He wasn't involved in the production side and stuff like that, but he said it was he said it was pretty messy being inside the industry, just not not well regulated, and then of course people cutting corners, right, trying to make a profit, things like that. So,
yeah. No, nothing is ever when politicians make a promise, nothing is as it seems, ever really.
right,
Um,
right,
so, and say what you will about Trump. I know that not everybody likes him, but he was definitely right about the cartels, being a threat still, uh, you know, here in America. So
yeah. And the cartels they make a lot of money off of moving illegals across the border who carry product for them, right?
yeah,
And yeah, so it it's the first book I write about human trafficking a little bit and probably through the cartel, but it's become a big thing, and now we've got other worries with uh, the folks that they send across, that with uh, all kinds of folks from different parts of the world who may or may not be
right.
very pro-America.
No, that's one thing that Andrews and Wilson, as we mentioned, that's one thing that they've written a bit about, how ISIS and all these other cartel groups are all these other terrorist groups, excuse me, are now using, the cartels to smuggle, you know, terror cells into the US, and you know, it may be fiction in their books, but it's happening, in reality, and that's a problem that no one seems to really want to publicly address. So
Right. When you look at the CBP reports of who they've apprehended, you've got people from Iran, from China, from Korea of one sort or another,
yeah,
things like that. And so, um, they could be, legit looking for, someplace safe and a better life and that kind of thing. But when we let them go free and it takes years for them to be adjudicated, that's not a good not a good plan.
yeah. Given your background in the military, this may be a little bit. I don't know if this is in your wheelhouse, and if it's not, let me know. But I am curious as to what your opinion is on the whole Israeli Palestine conflict. Do you think the U.S. should get involved, or what's your general take on that whole situation?
Well, I we're certainly our involvement right now is tactical in nature, but at an advisory role. Uh, I would believe that there are tier one teams standing by to assist, if they find some, American hostages, things like that. Um, the the unfortunate thing is, from my perspective, the Israelis looked at the calculus of doing, limited strikes and or sending in military to go after Hamas, and much like our military and a lot of other places in the free world, we value soldiers more than we do ordnance, right?
Right.
And so their calculus came to the point where we're gonna have to take out these facilities and things, and so uh, regardless of whether that number that comes from the Palestinian Authority is right or not, there's certainly been civilian casualties. I think they've done certainly. They've tried to, use leaflets and other things to get people to move out of an area, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we hear the stories about Hamas keeping them close, using them as shields, things like that. So they're put in a tough spot, but Israel's not afraid. They've been the pariah before, and they're not afraid to defend themselves.
Yeah.
And if Hamas had sent, even if Hamas had sent 1,000 rockets, across the border and Iron Dome and things like that, it wouldn't have been considered nearly the kind of atrocities that their attack was right in October.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think coming up soon, Israel will switch more to I hate to call it limited because it's not like they're going to stop operation, but I do believe that they will change operations and there won't be so much potential bombing that in effect looks like carpet bombing, right?
Right.
America's done the same thing. In Vietnam, arc light missions, would take out square miles of terrain, B-52s dropping tons of ordnance. In that case, though, we were bombing an agrarian country,
Right.
back into the Stone Age, and they were only 2 steps away from it. And now you've got Gaza, you've got people with internet, very, very dense environment, things like that. So
Yeah.
I understand why they're doing it. You wish you could send in your A teams, your tier one teams, and they could be surgical and do what they need to do. But I don't think that calculus was really there. And the calculus, right, is also adjusted, adapt, then whatever you might want to call it, by the politics of the situation. And by
Right. Yeah.
right. So,
Yeah. There's that too. Yeah. I actually I talked to a friend of mine who actually lives in Israel, probably about it was back in October, and she said that one of the things that that the IDF has really had trouble with too is they try not to kill civilians in Gaza because certainly there are a number of innocents over there. But the problem is Hamas is so well blended in, it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack over there. And so, yeah, they try to minimize civilian casualties, as much as possible, but it's hard when they blend in so well.
yeah, I mean, and a really good indication of that blending in, whether it was accepted, like in the hospitals, accepted or not,
Yeah.
was the fact that there were weapons and materials inside of, uh, baby equipment, right? Preemie equipment. There was stuff that was hidden in the arm of the X-ray, device and things. Just all kinds of not just a stash in the corner, not a stash in the basement, but just everywhere throughout the facility, they were finding stuff like that. And so very, very thoughtful, very, very insidious on Hamas's part to make it so, look, if you want to run this hospital, if you want to live here, if you want to live yourself, we're going to do this, and you're going to just not pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Be a doctor, things like that. And so it's tough, we had the same thing. And once again, World War II, Vietnam, who's the enemy, right? In the GWOT, who is the enemy? Is it a sheep herder, or does he have an AK and he's not, he's not my friend? And so it's unfortunately, when you go urban.
Did you actually serve in Vietnam, or did you join up a little bit after?
Yeah, by the time I got through training and they switched my MOS to, from being a radio operator in the Ranger Regiment, I got switched over to being this radio repair person who actually also operated and set up the radios. There was no going to Vietnam, and it was closing down at that point. So
one of my neighbors here, he actually he served. He was an Army engineer, electronics guy, and he actually did serve in Vietnam a little bit more towards the end there. So it it's a shame that Nixon. I actually tend to think that Nixon was actually a fairly decent president, and if it weren't for Watergate, we might have actually been able to succeed in, defeating the communists in Vietnam. But hindsight is 2020.
Yeah, I think special forces, Rangers, SEALs, pararescue, they all adapted to the real fight.
Yeah.
And right, you had all these officers that had been in World War II, Korea, and they wanted to do, major army against major army kinds of battles. And I believe the saying is we never lost one of those, army on army engagement. But the guerrilla warfare, and we really didn't understand coin counterinsurgency at that point, like we do now, like Petraeus and a couple of the other generals understood it, right? And as much as there was people in A teams or in SEAL teams doing hearts and minds kind of work, it was not something that really happened writ large.
Yeah.
And of course, even the people in Vietnam at some level saw the leadership is corrupt, and just sort of wanted to live their life, right? I got my rights paddies,
Yeah.
kids, just leave me alone, kind of idea.
Well, and I suppose too, this kind of goes back to a little bit about what you write about. I suppose the other thing is, like, with the drug cartels, we're not, the military isn't really fighting an army, when it comes to that, but it's more of, special forces essentially fighting organized crime, militarily, which is different than it's historically been.
Yeah, it's as you know, there. Excuse me. As you know, the Zetas at one point, before they sort of disbanded, they were very militaristic and better armed than the military. Between the Zetas and Sinaloa, helicopters have gone down, things like that. So they certainly have the hardware. In some cases, they have the training and the leadership. And so I think that unfortunately, the cartels have become such a big part of the GDP of Mexico. And they're like Neo, like Mr. Smith talks to Neo, right? It's like they're a virus, right? they become viral, and their tentacles reach into so many different things that what it would take to clear them out, stop them writ large, is beyond, I think, the pale of what the Mexican government could do with their military, and or the people don't want to go there, right?
Yeah.
In a week from when we record this, I'll be down in Puerto Vallarta, and I know it's relatively safe. I could do some stupid things, if I was so inclined, but it's
Right.
relatively safe in that environment because there's sort of a truce. Don't mess up that resort area, right? Because if people stop coming, it's going to hurt the cartel too. So there's these uneasy truces all around Mexico, and I believe the government, what they do is they sort of like whack-a-mole. It's like, okay, you're getting out of line. We send in the Marines, we send in, mobile group, of Army, things like that, or something like that. And when they've done that and they haven't paid attention, they've got spanked pretty hard, right? Like when they went after El Chapo's son and they had to like give him back, and
Yeah.
that's and with the corrupt police force, it's just hard to get anywhere, right?
Well, and they historically killed that one DEA agent back in the late 80s. They actually made a whole Netflix series about that with Narcos, and they got the cartels got spanked pretty hard for that, but then haven't really been touched that much since the, I guess, mid 2000s, like that. So
No, it as I actually, in my first book, I write that the people who run the West Coast for El Chapo, they got their position because they actually helped put El Padrino in jail. So
yeah. I mean the whole history of the cartels in South America is pretty fascinating. Everyone thought that if they got rid of Pablo Escobar, that would be the end of it, and it clearly wasn't.
exactly. Excuse me. Yeah, in Colombia, I mean, we get rid of Escobar, and then the Medellin cartel blows up, right?
Yeah.
And then El Chapo decides, well, I don't really need them. I'll go buy them and go to the growers and create my own connections and things like that. And so, little Mr. Enterprise, El Chapo, he changed the landscape himself. Not to mention, the Colombians were successful in getting after, certain elements, right? Like you say, when they got out of control down in Cali with the Medellin. Things like that.
Is Colombia, to your knowledge, still active in, I guess, the cartels? Or, I mean, you don't really hear about Colombia all that much these days as far as the cartels are concerned. But I can't imagine they went away. They just maybe...
No, they're still a big producer of cocaine, right? Being along the Andean Ridge, right? Peru and other places. So it's still there, and I think the leadership has learned how to be a little bit more low key, and not draw attention to themselves. They did make a connection finally with the guerrillas, right? Who had been against them because the guerrillas were so communist. You can't have drugs, and when you have a good communist environment running in your country. So, yeah, it's shifted around, but still, if not number one, certainly in the top three in cocaine production, and people just from all over different countries make use of them directly now.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine, like, I've heard that even a lot of the South American cartels are now getting into fentanyl too, since it's so cheap, at least from what I've heard. I'm not really into all the drug stuff. But
Yeah, the first place they went right was meth. So easy to to mix
right,
and put together. So everybody headed over to meth, and then now they've just continued along this synthetic, drug manufacturing, which is much like opium. Can start, some guy with a kettle, and a coal-fired stove, is just start processing stuff. And especially with fentanyl, you can get the precursor stuff still flowing into, even into Mexico and South America. So.
yeah. Um. So, I guess going forward, as far as your books go, you said you're in the middle of rewriting and pub and hoping to self-publish. So what is that, I guess, looking like right now? Are you going to be releasing books? I thought there are some books for sale in print on your website, but I guess where are you at with that right now?
Yeah, so with Force Poseidon going out of business, what I'm working on is much like I said, following Eric's footsteps. I'm editing Shadow Tier, playing around with Vellum, and we'll put it back out as an ebook. Under Stratton Media is my publishing company, and get the first two books out there. Shadow Sanction, I need to make some changes, but the book doesn't really need another edit. It's in good shape. My first book was my first book. I'd like I'd like another chance at it, right? So I got that, and like I said, an amazing editor here in Colorado, up in Nevada. You know where that's at is
right.
got the third book. In the third book, Lance's obsession with Ochapo takes him to Cuba. Hence the working title name, Caribbean Harvest. And,
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's a fun one because I actually switched. Also, I switched to first person. So the novella I've done, the origin story, that's with a different editor. The novella, the origin story about Lance Fairwolf himself, and then book 3 are written first person. And I'm a big fan of Brad Taylor and learned a lot. I've actually got a couple of his books I've deconstructed to learn how to took this from Don Beverly. Take a book, tear it apart, put it on the walls, circle highlighters, sort of tear it up like an OCD Mel Gibson, looking for a conspiracy, right?
Yeah.
But in my case, trying to learn how to write better. And I love first person because it's more intimate. It was when I first started reading it, it was sort of shocking, having been reading all these third person, kind of books. And but I really like it now. And so that's what's going on. I have, like I say, that fourth book is done. It's takes Lance in and the Shadow Tier team in a completely different direction due to a threat to the United States. And then I'm working on the outline for the fifth book. So I'm staying busy and looking forward to publishing more of these books. Lance and the team will expand, but Lance really fights to keep them out of the counterterrorism side of the world so they can focus on the drug war because that's his obsession.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you're you're writing these books, I guess, kind of in the past. Now you're starting in the in the in the 90s and then moving into the 2000s, which is strange because to me that still kind of seems contemporary, but that time was 20 years ago.
Isn't that amazing?
So,
yeah. It's so right now, until I get closer to the present, right now every book is about 3 years different. So I go 98. Well, actually it's 5 years, right? So 98 to 2003, but then I go to like 2006, 2009 is what I'm doing right now, just sort of creeping up. Not that the time or the date really it matters in some of the side story, right? Like in the 2000 another really great writer, Jeff Higgins, former DEA agent who led the drug war in Afghanistan. He spent a lot of
Yep.
time there. He wasn't on the scene yet in early 2003, but Shadow Tier knows about him. And
Yeah.
so, so I creep the books forward. And I actually have a completely different series with a female protagonist that I'm querying that takes place in present day. So I have none of those worries about what pistol was there, what communications medium, what were we doing,
Yeah.
how slow was the internet, was it dial-up, stuff like that.
No, I'm writing my books kind of in the present, but then I also have prequels that I'm writing that take place all the way back in the 80s. And
Oh, cool.
I was born in 95, but it's been pretty interesting researching, what was what was this like for the military back in the 80s. There's a lot of stuff that's still classified from 40 years ago that, I can't see, just because I'm a civilian. So, it's pretty interesting, but
Oh yeah, it's funny. I can take a friend over to the NSA Cryptologic Museum and show him products that I worked with.
yeah.
I'm so old. My stuff is like the first Air Force One I flew on is in a Boeing museum. It's like I'm old. I'm getting old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, if you ever need help with the 80s, that was really 80, 80s to 2000 was my really active time. So.
Yeah, did you meet Reagan by chance?
Yeah, I met President Reagan. Before I left the Secret Service, I went down to Houston and put in physical security systems and video and stuff in Vice President Bush's house. I met him and Barbara Bush one. So
Yeah.
yeah, fun time, great people. The Fords, great people, things like that. So
Yeah.
Rockefellers, it's fun to chat for a minute with a Rockefeller who could own South America, things like that. It's like, wow,
Yeah.
this is tripping me out.
Well, there are some people in my audience who, would think that the Rockefellers are the are maybe like evil people or whatnot. I don't know. There are lots of weird conspiracy theories that make great thrillers, but I try not to dive too much into the conspiracy theory world.
Well, it is interesting when you look back and see how some of the generational wealth was built in the early
Yeah.
days, right? Between the Kennedys and the Rockefellers and railroads and mining and gas and oil, things like that. And there was some pretty hardcore, maybe unscrupulous business things that went on back then that started building that generational wealth. But
Yeah.
the people I met and talked with were real people. I met Dick Cheney when he was chief of staff for Ford, right?
Yeah.
Things like that. And so they also too had a different perspective on the world and what was going on at the time. So.
Oh yeah. So, well, I really appreciate you coming on, and I will certainly probably be reaching out, to you if you have the chance to look at a few of my, manuscripts. Eric, recommended you pretty highly, and a few of the other
Thank you. Yeah.
people
Like
have
you say,
as
if you
well.
need help with tech or something from the 80s to the 2000s, I can help you out. After that, I was doing some other special things inside the DoD and Intel community. So
Yeah, I'd
we
be.
can actually talk about at some point. So.
Oh yeah, and I'd be happy to give you a few edits if you need anything as well. So
That's what I love about the writers community. We're always looking to help each other, right? Because we all get stronger from it. So
yeah, that's one of the things that is that's a little surprising about the community. The podcasting community is mostly very supportive, but there are a few people who are antagonistic as well. So, but I haven't found any of that really in the writing community at all. Quite the opposite. So,
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I've walked up and talked to Mark Greaney, Brad Taylor, you know,
yeah,
other huge, Brad Thor. I'm like, do you mind if I come back in a minute? And he's like, no, come on back. He signed Lions of Lucerne, which was in large part looked like a retelling of Ford being at Vail, right? When the
right,
president gets
right.
kidnapped. So like, I need to get this signed. He's such a
Yeah,
nice
the
guy.
yeah, Lions of Lucerne and Transfer of Power, the first Vince Flynn novel. I read those. I took a gap year between high school and college, and that was 10 years ago now. And that was when I kind of figured, well, if these guys can write these, well then shoot, I've had these outlines kind of in my head, so why don't I make an attempt? So
Awesome.
it's been quite a journey, but
Absolutely. I can say that for sure.
yeah. Well, anything, I mean, obviously you're still kind of, it seems like a work in progress, but is there anything that you'd like to plug or promote kind of here at the?
Yeah, I mean, folks can stay in touch, of course, by going to my website, stevenstrattonusa.com, stevenstrattonusa.com, and get on the mailing list. I do book giveaways every month. I buy signed copies of books. Some of the authors send them to me, and then I give them away. And so we have giveaways of my books, other author books, things like that. And love to stay in touch with people, hear what they think about my books
Yeah,
as I get them back online. And then hopefully, by the end of this year, I can have a novella and 4 books that I could probably do, like a discount set, a box set kind of idea, things like that.
yeah, yeah,
So I'm looking forward to all those options and just learning more as I continue to grow as a writer, learning more about publishing and self-publishing in particular, because people like you and John Stamp and Eric and a lot of other folks are ahead of me, and I've got so much to learn and sort of separate the wheat from the chaff kind of idea, get to the right things.
yeah. Well, if it makes you feel any better, I mean, I'm still learning too. I first looked into self-publishing with Kindle like 10 years ago. I published a short story, and it actually sold pretty well. And then, as I mentioned, I started college. Like, I had to put fiction writing on the back burner. But then, kind of when I came back, to writing this time last year and finished my, first novella, everything with Kindle publishing at least had kind of changed, and you could print paperbacks now. And I think now, Eric was telling me they now even have like a hardback option, too, which is wild. So,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's
As good and as maddening as Ingram Spark can be,
yeah,
that there's all these options. It's just great that a lot of people talk about writing a book, and we're a small percentage, that have completed a book.
yeah,
But that does. I mean, you I now know, through KDP and stuff, you can create a cover, you can do everything right inside that environment,
yeah,
your first time. So that's great, and there's plenty of other people who will, you can learn from. And I'm a continuous learner. I love learning.
yeah. As am
I'm
I.
later this year we're going to go to Italy, so I've got Babbel now, and I'm learning Italian, and my wife and I are laughing at each other trying to do Italian, stuff like that. So it's just another medium of another place to learn and continue to grow. Keep that plaque out of my brain, so I
My
remember what I was intending to do when I walk in the room.
Yeah,
So
my folks actually just got back from a 2-month trip in Italy, and they had a great time.
nice,
So,
two
uh,
months.
and
Wow.
and don't feel too bad about not not knowing Italian because my mother bought all those CDs to learn how to speak Italian, and I think she dug them out maybe like once or twice, and then she was working, but then she retired, and then they went to Italy, so they were able to get by, so it was pretty good. But
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, that I think from what I've heard, you'll have a great time. But anyway, well, thank you for coming on, sir. SteveStrattonUSA.com. That's your website. And, Steve is pretty active on Twitter, too, so follow him there. And, thank you for coming on, sir, and I appreciate, your time, and I'll let you get back to writing. So.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here. Enjoyed talking with you. And for all those folks out there, that have the dream, keep writing, never quit.
Indeed. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you folks on Wednesday. So, take care.
Thanks for listening to The Whitfield Report on the NGC Network. Please visit Sam's website at www.thesamwhitfield.com and support Sam on Patreon at patreon.com/Whitfield Report. Until next time, God bless, God save this great nation, and God, freedom, legacy, in that order.